Hello everyone, and welcome to the BFit Studio. My name is Connor Murphy, and today we're going to be reviewing the push-up. Now, we're not going to be reviewing the push-up from an elite standard, but essentially how we can progress to get to that level. We'll start off with a couple simple starting positions, and then some progressions to get you your first real or honest push-up, and then how we can continue to advance and progress from there to get to the point where we're doing 10, maybe 15 freestanding handstand push-ups in the center of a room. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start with the very basics, which is going to be hand position and then body position. Your arms are going to be happiest and healthiest is if your hands are directly under your shoulders. That's the way our body is intended to move. And I want to make sure that my shoulders are going to be directly in front of my wrists. So from a front view, look a little bit like this. And from a side view, what I want you to focus on right now is just the shoulder being over my wrist. Well, you'll also notice that I'm trying to maintain a rigid position from my shoulder to my hip to my knee to my foot. That's going to be the key importance of an honest push-up. Now, if I'm not able to achieve that position, there are a couple ways that we can work on this static isometric contraction before we start to move on. So the first thing is if you can hold this position for a minute straight, I think we're ready and we have that prerequisite strength in the isometric piece to start to go through our eccentric movements. Now, if you can't, what you can start to do is hold it for 5 seconds, rest for 20 seconds. Try that for 8 rounds. Once you advance from that, you can go 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off, all the way on to 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, which is our typical Tabata timing, until we can get to the progression where we can do a minute straight while pressing. Something I want you to focus on the press too, about holding the top of that push-up position, is notice I'm not allowing my chest to sag. I'm almost actively pressing all the way into it. Pressing through the ground all the way through my shoulders is going to maximize the contribution of all of the muscles in my upper body and my shoulder. Also with that locked out arm, it's going to give me some skeletal support as well. So once we have that down, what we're going to do is we're going to lower ourselves to the ground. Now this is where a lot of times when people that can already do push-ups start to get a little bit of a miss. So if I'm here, what I'm looking to do is lower my nose, my chest, my belly, and my thighs down to the ground. I pull my elbows back, and I lower myself all the way down to the ground until everything is touching in that piece. Now, Greg Glassman once said that it is a race for your nose, your chest, your belly, and your thighs to get to the ground last, not first. So we want to avoid any type of these positions where we're reaching. Usually goes wrong in one of 4 ways. First, if I'm really tight or I don't have the strength, sometimes my hips will start to sag and I will touch the ground first here. Another way is if I just start simply reaching my shoulders forward and my hips aren't actually lowering. So from here I leave some of my body up and I'm reaching my nose down to the ground, or even keeping my thighs off the ground for my chest to hit early. What we want to do is maintain rigidity, staying all the way flat until I get down to the ground, and then press myself back up. Something that I see often with multiple reps in a push-up is that we're getting contact with the ground, but it's just the belly. So for a few rounds, I am having contact, but with a craned up neck position. It's just not going through that full honest push-up. So what we want to start to do is start to get ourselves better at that eccentric movement, or that contraction during the elongating phase of the tricep during my push-up, also known as negatives. So once you've been able to maintain that minute hold, the next thing is to see how slowly you can lower yourself down to the mat or down to the floor. Ideally, at first, we can do a 5-second descent all the way into a 10-second to 20 to an even 30-second descent for my push-up. My elbows are tracking back, my body is going forward, slowly lowering all the way down. I'm going to race for which body part can hit last. As I press myself back up, I'm not too focused as I'm working on the negatives about what that contraction, that concentric movement looks like when I press myself back up. What I'm looking for is just to be able to maintain that rigid body all the way down. Once you can perform 5 to 10 of those negative push-ups slow for maybe a 5 to 10 second descent, we're ready to start working on our actual honest push-up, which is a controlled movement down, that flat position, and then a controlled movement up to the extended arm and actively pressing into the ground. This is what one honest push-up will look like. Even faster, or a little bit more realistic for a workout. Something I want to note on the shoulder position is that oftentimes I'll see people widen their hands out, and then as they do a push-up, their elbow starts to bow out. Not going to make your elbow very happy. Also, it's not going to use the proper musculature for this push-up. What it's doing is it's internally rotating your shoulders, and almost think about your shoulder in this instance as like a wet cloth. As I'm rotating it, it's tightening, so it's putting pressure on my shoulder. You've got a lot of stuff going on here with your pec minor attaching, your biceps tendon attaching right at the front or your anterior shoulder here. So what's happening as this happens is I'm really starting to stretch or tighten down in that shoulder joint. So it makes the push-up potentially feel easier, but I'm not getting as much musculature and I'm not developing as much muscle as if I'm able to keep my hands in tight. So the difference is if I face forward, or if I'm starting to go wide, notice the elbow position. Again, it's not going to make my elbows very happy, and it's also not going to develop as much strength in this position. Oftentimes with that, you'll see people going to a 90-degree position or not going through the full natural and anatomical end range of the push-up. So we want to make sure we're going through that full end range. Once you're able to perform a few of those, we can start to develop some rep schemes or even some time workouts to continue to develop our push-up. See if you can do 30 honest push-ups, unbroken. That means without coming down to your knees, without breaking at your midline at all. Once you're able to develop that strength, maybe try for 20 seconds of work, 10 seconds of rest for 8 rounds, so typical Tabata, but can you maintain 15 reps in each of those 20-second time periods, all the way up to 20 seconds. And then from there, we can even continue to develop strength in our push-up from doing them on parallettes or dumbbells, simply raising the plane in which I'm pressing from, and then we can start to add a little bit extra range of motion for our push-up. So if I'm gonna go from even just here, if I just do it on my knuckles, as you'll notice, the elevated position, when I'm pressing up, my shoulders will be higher, and the range of motion will be slightly greater. Sometimes not something we can get from the bench press because that bar touches our shoulder, or a bar touches our chest. Not to say anything wrong with the bench press, but there's a huge amount of capacity and stability that we get from the push-up. And then simply as it transfers into our handstand push-up, if you start to elevate your feet, perhaps put your feet 12 inches above and then go through that same range of motion. Now we're not trying to reach to the ground, so it'll be a little bit different because it won't be chest, thighs, and everything touching the ground at once. But from that elevated position, we just want to try to avoid reaching our head forward, as I can do in a push-up here, where I'm reaching forward where my head is the first thing to touch. I want to just maintain that neutral position. And then you can take that same approach, getting all the way up into a handstand push-up. Nothing changes with the width of my grip. Nothing changes with the anatomy of my elbow and shoulder. I still want to move it in the same way. And then we can gradually get ourselves to a handstand position. If we can do a handstand against the wall, can we hold it for a minute, like we just talked about at the top of our push-up? Can I do a 5 or 10 second eccentric slowly down to my head? If we can't go all the way down to our head without bouncing our head off the ground, maybe starting to add in a couple of ab mats where I'm not touching the ab mat and pressing back up, or I'm not touching the pad on my head and pressing back up, but I'm just lowering all the way down until I can release that pressure from my hands. Once you can do a few of the negatives or the eccentrics, then you can start to work on the concentric movement. There's so much capacity to be developed in the push-up. We want to make sure that we're doing it right. We don't want to skip these steps. We call that the novice curse in that. Hey, I feel like I can do a couple of push-ups from my belly, or maybe I always scale to do push-ups from your toes. Use this progression to start to develop that capacity in your push-up, and the rest of your fitness, because of the balance that's included in that, is going to get better. If you guys have any questions on the push-up, feel free to drop them in the comments. We can start to work on some more advanced progressions for this, but hopefully this gives you an idea on where you can start with your push-up.